Hello, my name is Jennifer Snow. I am a student of history at Liberty University. Today we are here to talk about the town of Wytheville, a growing township located in the scenic Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia. The town of Wytheville is where I lived for several years, and the town has an interesting history to share. Located not only in the beautiful mountains, but also at a major crossroads of the interstates and highways, many travelers pass through Wytheville on their way to vacation destinations or on business trips. People from all over the world spend the night at the numerous hotels and motels that dot the landscape in Wytheville. Although the town is still relatively small, a vast number of travelers and tourists pass through the town every year, even during the COVID shutdown of 2020. The one exception to this steady stream of visitors is when the town closed its borders during the terrible polio epidemic of the early 1950s, instructing visitors to drive around the town instead of through it. Wytheville is also known for its outdoor summer concerts, its many museums, its participation in the Chautauqua Festival in June, the giant pencil on Main Street, which is actually a national landmark, and its famous hot air balloon rides. There is plenty to see and discover in Wytheville, but it is the history of the town's namesake that interests me the most. The town of Wytheville was originally named Evansham, and there are still echoes of the old name around town. After a fire in the year of 1839, the town was renamed Wytheville after George Wythe, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Today, the town boasts that there is only one town with that name in the United States. However, the legacy of the town has shifted its historical focus. The town today tends to focus on the history of Edith Bolling Wilson, wife of President Woodrow Wilson. Edith Bolling Wilson was born in Wytheville and spent her childhood years in the township. Ms. Wilson is certainly an interesting national figure. Pardon me. Yes. Pardon me. However, the history of the town's namesake, George Wythe, has sadly fallen by the wayside. The historic George Wythe Hotel on Main Street has even been renamed the Bolling Wilson, with barely a mention on the hotel's website about George Wythe, the man the hotel and the town were originally named for. While studying and celebrating the life of Edith Bolling Wilson is not wrong, and in fact has a lot of interesting facts to discover, leaving the history of the town's namesake to fall by the wayside is unacceptable. As historians, it is vital that we examine as many of the facts as possible, not leaving one historical figure behind in favor of another. George Wythe was a very influential, yet nearly forgotten American founding father. George Wythe was a teacher of law, and his most prominent student was Thomas Jefferson, who would later write the Declaration of Independence. This alone would be reason enough to study Wythe. However, Wythe's life involved even more claims to fame. Wythe was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a respected member of the Virginia community. Additionally, George Wythe worked alongside Thomas Jefferson to revise the entire legal code of Virginia, leaving an impact not only on the state, but on the nation. It is well known that all states looked to Virginia for guidance during the formation of the United States government, especially during the Constitutional Convention. Wyth's influence on the legal code of the United States as a whole cannot be undervalued. Wyth also helped to design the state seal of Virginia, which features virtue, dressed as an Amazon, holding a spear above the form of a conquered tyrant, and the words Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means thus ever to tyrants. The reverse side of the seal bears the image of Libertas, Eternitas, and Ceres, with the word Perseverando, which means persevere. This state seal is visually and historically interesting, and yet another way that George Wythe impacted the history of Virginia and the United States as a whole. George Wythe was an abolitionist, a virtuous man, and a beloved mentor. Wythe freed his slaves and was murdered by his nephew when it was discovered that Wythe was going to bequeath much of his property to his former slaves after his death. The legacy of George Wythe, though nearly forgotten, is all around us in Virginia every day. Sadly, most of George Wythe's letters have been lost to history. However, through the efforts of Wikipedia, an outreach of William and Mary Law Library, a partial collection of Wythe's papers have been gathered from other collections, such as the Washington Papers and the Addams Family Papers. It is my hope that this influential founding father, for whom the town of Wytheville was named, will come into the spotlight once again. The study of local history should never exclude one historical figure in favor of another. George Wythe, the man who taught Thomas Jefferson, freed his own slaves, and influenced the legal code of the United States, is a man worthy of study, if only for the brief highlights of his busy life. While Wythe's life ended in tragedy, his legacy lives on, as all who live under the banner of the state of Virginia are reminded every time we see our state flag. Sic Semper Tyrannis. Thank you very much, and you all have a wonderful evening.